The other night I saw the scenes from a new film called Live from the Frontlines. And it was very intriguing to me because when we speak about what's happening to the environment, we speak about it in a general way. This film was intriguing because it talked about how individuals are very often affected by oil wells being drilled in their backyard, by various other pollutants in their life, in their everyday life. And I didn't realize there were so many. And suddenly, the polluted world in which we're living became very personal, less abstract, and a lot more dangerous to those of us who saw this little film. So today we're going to talk about the person who created this group, Live from the Frontlines, Damien Luzzo. And we're going to we brought in an example of someone who has been personally affected by it, Nalleli Cobo. Let's begin with Damien Luzzo. Damien, welcome to Connect the Dots.
Hi, Lila. Thanks for having me here.
It's a pleasure. Now, Damien is emerging as a documentary filmmaker and the co-founder of a new project called Live from the Frontlines. Well, let's find out exactly what that means. Okay, what does it mean?
Yeah, so Live from the Frontlines is a feature-length documentary project that was created to lift up and amplify the voices of frontline community members throughout California who've been adversely impacted by neighborhood oil drilling and other forms of fossil fuel pollution. And beyond just doing a documentary, we're doing live streams and we're doing short videos, trying to get word out about these issues immediately, trying to, in real time, let people know what's happening and to help to amplify the stories of folks that have been impacted.
Yeah, well, that was what appealed to me about it, that it became very personal, you know? And as we heard you speak and heard some of the victims that you were talking about speak, everyone in the room felt that this could happen to them. And very possibly is happening to them without their realizing it. And as an example of someone who was impacted personally by the impurities that we heap upon our people, we have Nalleli Cobo with us. And she's a young woman whose activism began when she was hospitalized as a result of living right across the street from a drilling operation in South Los Angeles, which is owned by Allen Company and operates on land that is leased to the oil company by the Archdiocese. What does Archdiocese mean in this case?
So it means that the church is leasing the land to the oil company. So I've always gone to a Catholic school. And when they do this, I just see them as hypocrites in the sense that they're choosing money over our community's health. They're choosing profit over people. And I've always gone to a Catholic school and they always tell us we need to protect God's creation. We need to love thy neighbor. And yet here they are doing the complete opposite.
Right. Well, how were you impacted physically? It says here that you were hospitalized as a result of living right across the street from what the oil company was doing. They were obviously digging for oil. And tell us how they did that and why you weren't aware of it. I mean, did they cover the oil well with something, as they have done in my neighborhood? I live near Fox Studios, and they have oil wells all over the place in that particular part of the west side of Los Angeles. And it's supposed to be so fancy. And the truth is that those great majestic towers that are over them are really hiding poison. That's what's happening in my neighborhood. Is that what's happening in yours?
Yeah, and I'm really sorry to hear you have the same story, going through the same pain as my community. But that's what truly unites us in this fight, if that makes sense. So I grew up 30 feet across the street from an oil well called Alanco, and while they were operating, they were exposing toxic emissions that made not only me, but the rest of my community sick. So in my personal experience, I developed asthma, and that's something I'm always going to have to live with now. I got body spasms that got to the point where I couldn't walk. I had to be carried from one place to another. Wow. I got nosebleeds that were so intense that I couldn't sleep horizontally. I had to sleep upright so I wouldn't choke on my own blood at night. And headaches that were so extreme, I had to get my MRIs done at the age of 10 or 9. And that's not a normal life for a young girl. And unfortunately, it wasn't just my reality. It was my community's reality. So that's what really inspired me to stand up and make a change in my community.
Well, tell us, where is your community exactly?
So I grew up in South LA around 23rd and Figueroa. I call it the sandwich between the USC and Staples Center.
Right. And how do you know that your community was involved in this? I mean, what was your feeling before you connected it to the oil drilling? Was your feeling that there was an epidemic going on? You didn't know where it was coming from? How did you discover that it was attached to the oil drilling?
So Physicians for Social Responsibility Los Angeles actually sent a toxicologist to come and speak to my community. And that's when we made the connection that hydrogen sulfide causes X, Y, and Z symptoms, and benzene causes X, Y, and Z symptoms. So that's when we truly made the connection and started organizing ourselves as a community we created a grassroots campaign called People Not Pozos, which translates to People Not Wells. And we started sharing our story. We started going to town hall meetings, to city hall hearings, sharing our story with different newspapers and such so we can make a change.
Right. Helen Caldecott was the one who started Physicians for Social Responsibility. She's a good friend of mine, and she's done the world a great favor.
Yes.
It's too bad the world isn't more appreciative of it. Yes. And it's too bad that they didn't spend the last 40 years really trying to correct the situation more than they did, getting after, trying to prosecute people like us who are trying to change it. But I think we're getting somewhere. And that's because of people like you and Damien. Now, Damien, you were an environmental organizer, and from the get-go, before you created Live from the Frontlines. So you managed to get a group together, and one thing led to another, and now you have an organization going that sounds to me like it has a big future. When you start talking to groups that are very official and so on, it's one thing. But when you start talking to individuals who've been impacted by these toxic problems, it becomes much more identifiable, much more serious. And tell us, so how long has the organization been existed? And how many people are involved, and then talk about your film.
Sure. So I would say Live from the Frontlines is really, it was really invented and came in inception in June of last year, 2018. So, and it really just came through a string of it really just came through a string of conversations with frontline community members throughout the years during my environmental organizing, and just driving through the fields of Kern County, where they've just got endless pump jacks as far as the eye can see. The person I drove with, his name's Elliot. He works on this film with me as well. And, he would just say, like, Damien, like, people need to see what's happening. And I just heard that over and over from one friend after another and one community member after another, until it was like, you know what, like, next time I come out here, I'm going to bring a camera and we're going to get this going, and we're going to show the world what's happening in California, and we're going to expose California for the environmental racism that's taking place here, and the egregious fact that we are one of the only states in the United States with no setback limits, nothing to protect communities from oil and gas operations.
How quickly do you think you've grown? How many members do you have?
I would say we've got about 20 people that I would call crew and team members. And then that extends way beyond when we're talking about folks that have been, volunteering their time and helping us to, like, start conversations with impacted community members. And so I would say I would say we're much bigger than just our team and our crew, and we're very much every person that comes in as a new person to tell their story is not only just telling us their story, but they're telling us how they want their story to be told.
Right. And how many stories have you heard from how many people? That's my question, really.
Wow. So I would say we're probably somewhere between 100 or 50 and 100 people that we've spoken to. And we've gone to a lot of marches and rallies and events where we've heard from handfuls of people. And then we've had, a lot of folks that we've been talking to that we've sat down and been speaking with, for 4 hours at a time. So the idea is to hopefully have the opportunity to go in and truly invest this time in creating these stories.
So do you find that the organization is growing because there are that many people who have been impacted by these toxic the oil and so on?
These things have been happening in people's backyards for a long time now. And a lot of people have come into communities and have talked with people like Nalleli and have there have been a lot of folks that have come in and tried to tell this story or tried to report on what's happening. And I think what's different, and I would say very recently, there are a lot of communities coming up and, definitely reaching out to us and saying, like, this is what's happening here. Can you come out and, point a camera at this? Can you come out and, have it so I can share my story too? And I think that's coming through not because, of how terrible this issue is or, what we're doing, but I think it's that we're doing something a little different where we're not just going in and recording these stories and asking these communities questions and packing up our things and leaving. And we're not parachuting. We're here to invest time in these communities to build real relationships. And
so you're not sending rockets up the way Trump is.
Right.
Into space, huh? Well, you're not sending rockets into neighborhoods. He's capable of doing that as well. All right. So now, what would you like our listeners to do? I'll tell you what I'd like our listeners to do and why I invited you on the show. First of all, this is a personal issue. What's happening to you and your family. And when I saw the little film with 5 or 6 testimonials by ordinary people, I would say most of them were low-income people, and I'll get to that question in a moment. But their sincerity, their passion, for someone who's an old hand like me, their purity, their political purity was very appealing. And when you watch them speak, and you very wisely shot them in their neighborhoods, so you could see what was really happening. You got a feeling that this is an organization that I would like to call, me personally, because of those castles that I remember, those towers that I mentioned to you on Fox's property, which is right around the corner from me. I used to work at Fox, as a matter of fact, and I didn't realize then that they were poisoning the environment. I just thought they were underpaying me, and that was their worst fault. But getting back to this now, seriously, what would you like our audience to do? Would you like our listeners to be in touch with you if they have such a problem? Would you like them to be in touch with you if they are sympathetic about such a problem, if they just want to join you, help you, or perhaps give you lots of money so that you can finish this film? What are your motivations?
Well, I mean, money for the film would be great. But what actually motivates us to do this, like in the end, whatever comes of this project, whatever comes of the film, the idea of Live from the Frontlines is to use anything, whether it's resources, connections, proceeds from this film, whatever it is that this project ultimately brings us the capacity to have. We want to give all of this back to these communities. and to continue to help the great work of these local organizations. And these local organizations are organizations that work on the front lines every day. They're the most knowledgeable of these issues, and they're probably, doing more work than a lot of these statewide groups are. And they don't get the same attention. They don't get the same funding potential. And this is really where I think, the ultimate drive of this whole thing is to really empower these communities to continue the amazing work that they've already started.
Right. Now, at the meeting that I went to where I saw a little bit of your film and was so impressed with it, people spoke about the fact that they also wanted volunteers just to join you, people who do the same kind of investigating you do, who find other victims who are in trouble because of what's happening to them locally and so on. So if my listeners want to contact you, Damien Luzzo, tell us, how do they do it?
Well, you can email me, Damien at livefromthefrontlines.org. And if you are looking for a way to, be actively involved with what's happening locally, what's happening statewide, to a greater scale than just a documentary film or the kind of work that we're doing, I really encourage folks to, really plug into local organizations and other groups that are working on these issues, like Stand LA, Stand Together Against Neighborhood Drilling Los Angeles, doing a lot of great work on the issue of neighborhood drilling, as well as Food and Water Watch, and a lot of great groups in the Central Valley who are also working on issues like pesticides, which is a very intersectional issue when we're talking about fossil fuel pollution.
Okay, before we leave, Nalleli, we understand that you're involved in something called setback limits. Explain that to us.
Yeah, so a lot of my work with my activism focuses on fighting to establish a 2,500 health and safety buffer zone between oil extraction and sensitive land. And any sensitive land is schools, hospitals, residential areas, anything like that. And we really do that because there's no existing setback limit right now in the city of Los Angeles. And there have been studies done that if you're closer than 1,600 feet, I believe, you can get certain sicknesses, certain illnesses. You have a higher risk for developing cancer. For females, we have a higher risk for damage to our reproductive systems. And that's something that's not okay. Like, everybody has the right to breathe clean air despite their age, gender, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. And it's not okay that it's 2019 and we're still fighting for that in low-income communities of color. So the buffer zone, if we get that, when we get that, actually, it would close about 86% of the oil wells in the Los Angeles area, because of how close they are to homes.
Well, that sounds like it has an impact, again, on people of modest means. So they're the first ones to suffer from all of these things, including defense budgets that are $700 billion a year. The president talked about that the other night, only to be raised to $716 billion this year. So this country has to get out of the habit of thinking that war is priority number one. And we're thinking what you're doing is priority number one, and that is saving the planet. So Nalleli, Cobo, and Damien Luzzo, thank you so much for joining us and for being pioneers in this excellent organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should add that Nalleli Cobo won her fight against Allen Company. Allen Company has been temporarily shut down for 5 years now, but they continue to fight to reopen their facility and resume operations. As soon as Allen Company ceased their operations, all of Nalleli's symptoms went away. The only thing she lives with now is asthma and any other issues that may come up in the future. If you're interested in Live from the Frontlines, this new organization that really can go to very dynamic and important places Go to livefromthefrontlines.org and get more information.